Damon.
Good evening, Emma.
Thank you for being here tonight.
Pleasure.
You've made 25 records in the last 25 years. How come you've waited this long to make your first solo album?
Well, I mean, it never occurred to me, really. I'm a serial collaborator, I think, by nature. But Richard Russell asked me. I mean, in fact, the last time I was on the show was with Bobby Womack. And after we'd finished that, we were enjoying working together. We had a nice sort of rhythm in the way we worked. You know, his hours worked with my hours, and it was just sort of, we wanted to carry on making music. And I think if you're going to do something very personal, which to my understanding is what a solo record is about. I mean, it's not about playing everything on your own. I mean, Brian Eno's on it, Natasha Khan from Bat for Lashes, the London City Mission Choir on it. So it's about doing something that's very personal. And when you start to talk in those sort of terms, I think it's important to have someone who you trust to share that with. And I felt like that about Richard. And, you know, I knew he'd be a very good A&R man because, you know, he started Exhale Records. He's discovered and nurtured some extraordinary artists over the years. So I felt comfortable with, you know, trusting him.
And did he push you to be, like, more introspective?
I think that just came from, you know, realising that I had to do something that came completely from my heart. I mean, not that I haven't... The music I've made hasn't got that personal aspect to it, but I think on this occasion, you know, I started singing about my own childhood. There was no real observation of other people, or, you know, it was just stuff, really. If I'd written a diary, it would have come straight out of my diary, but I have never written a diary, so I had to go back to the places. I had to go back to Leytonstone, where I grew up till I was 9.
And to Essex, too?
To Essex afterwards, yeah. But, I mean, when I went back to Leytonstone, there's a piece of common land which used to be part of the ancient forest of Epping, but that's all disappeared now. But what's left of these, there's still a little area of trees and these old gravel pits called the Hollow Ponds. And I remember, you know, extremely fondly playing there as a kid. And that particular summer of 1976, I don't know I'm sure in France it was an amazing summer as well, but in England it was the most extraordinary thing ever. We had sunshine for a month, uninterrupted.
So you get your swimming trunks?
Well, everyone did. I mean, that was the thing about it. It was like London hadn't really seen itself in that way. I mean, you know, I think London has realised that they were part of this expanding multicultural phenomenon, really. We had people from the West Indies, from South America, from Pakistan, Bangladesh, India. Yeah, and we were all there. We were all there by these small lakes, and I thought that would be a nice point to start, really. And once I got that in my head, then really telling a story about my life became a lot easier.
So going back to Leytonstone and Essex, was it a way for you to reconnect with your roots?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you felt that it was like a little trip down memory lane, or was it more like something?
It was a very long trip down memory lane, actually.
Yeah, but was it something you did to understand things about yourself?
Yeah.
Who you are?
I think I realised that. I realised that growing up in multicultural East London, and then when I was 9, I went on a mad kind of holiday with a friend of my parents to Turkey, and I travelled around that summer around Turkey, and I had a lot of freedom. For some reason, I seemed to spend quite a bit of time on my own, which kind of sounds kind of quite alarming now. I mean, considering this was sort of the Turkey of Midnight Express, so it was, you know.
But you were too young for drugs anyway.
I was too, yes, I was definitely too young for drugs. But I remember walking into mosques and sitting down and being allowed just to sit there and watch. And I used to go to tea houses and carpet shops and walk around the bazaar and the souk. Really great memories. And anyway, when I came back, my parents had moved to rural Essex. I'd known that they hadn't just disappeared when I got back, but I knew that they were going to move. But I hadn't taken part in that move. So it was, for me, it was kind of, I was here, then I was there, and then I was here. And here was so different to two of the places that were my previous experience. You know, I was in the middle of Anglo-Saxon Essex. It was completely white, very conservative. And at that point, in a way, I became sort of a bit of an outsider. And I think that's when, in a way, I became...
Yourself?
Myself. Or I was myself, but I became another self. But that self is who I became, so to speak.
So you mean you became Damon Albarn at this very moment?
I was Damon Albarn, but I became... I started to want to write music, and I just saw the world in a slightly different way. I saw it from more of an outside view, you know, and I think that, for me, was that moment where the creative spark was, you know,
so
ignited.
It's all about Turkish, then? That's the big...
Turkey was the big moment, yeah, it was. And I think, so when I was trying to tell that kind of story about that movement and what happened to me subsequently, you know, I needed to have those three things in place. And in the song Holler Ponds, I kind of explained that. And then the rest of the record moves right from the present day, kind of sort of all the way through my teenage years, a bit of like life in the 90s, life in the 2000s, you know. But it starts in 1976.
I was born in 1976.
There you go.
Very good year.
So you don't remember the heat wave?
No, I was in the belly. You said about Leytonstone that it was like a window to other cultures. So
Yeah.
do you think that it explains who you are and the variety of projects you've been working on so far?
I think it must have something to do with that, you know. And I remember there was this fantastic Pentecostal church at the end of my road called the London City Mission. And when I went back this time, I walked past it, and there's just this heap of memories started flooding back of being a kid on my bicycle and on Sundays cycling up and standing outside this church, which at that time, when I was 8 or younger, seemed to have a huge, great gate and then these stairs up to this big door, and, you know, it was an impressive church. But there was always this incredible sound coming out of it. And I suppose, in a way, that must have stayed with me because, you know, as soon as I could kind of work with a gospel choir, I did, you know. And I suppose the big moment for me was when I wrote Tender, and I got the London Community Gospel Choir to play on that. But, yeah, I suppose, I don't know. It seems to me that growing up there is partly why I've done so many sort of different things.
It seems that you're asking yourself a lot about technology and where it's driving us to.
Yeah, I think that I've always been a bit of a, not a Luddite in the strict sense of the word, but I've had a difficult relationship with technology. I'm not fantastic. I lose my phone. I used to lose it weekly. It's now every couple of months, so I am improving. I've never really been a very good driver. I had a license for 1 year, but it was a bit of a disaster, so I stick to my bicycle now. I've never had a computer, but I do have an iPad, and I love my iPad, and I find it a very powerful creative tool. So I'm not completely anti-technology at all. I just have a difficult relationship with it. But I think you know, in a way, it's watching my daughter grow up and her relationship with technology that has kind of manifested itself on this record, my anxiety, because yeah, her generation, and you've got a daughter similar age to mine, I think. You know, I mean, it's just constant. It's non-stop.
Well, you have to have rules.
You do have to have rules, but you know,
That is hard.
When you're not watching them, they're doing that. You know?
And so, is it?
And the question is posed on the record, is what's happening? Is this extraordinary transition that we are witnessing, as a, you know, on a social level? Is it something that's making us more distant from our spiritual selves, or is it something that will eventually connect us all in a much more profound way? And, you know, I suppose a lot of the songs deal with that question.
So the melancholy we can hear on the album comes from that?
To a degree, I think that's just generally when I open my mouth, it sounds a bit sad. You know, I mean, I'm not a sad person, but I just that seems to be kind of, my soul maybe is like that. I don't know.
The gospel choir from the Pentecostal mission from Leytonstone,
yes,
is on the record on the track Mr. Tembo. Was it important to you that it was particularly that choir?
Well, that song was inspired and written for a baby elephant.
In Tanzania?
Exactly. That I have friends there called the Fitzjohns, and they run a preservation area for the Tanzanian government called Mukamazi. They do a fantastic job of reintroducing wild dogs and rhino and occasionally lions to that part of the wilderness. And we were visiting, and a week before we got there, this elephant had turned up on their aerodrome, because you can't get there unless you fly. It's so isolated. And its mum had been shot by poachers, so it was completely helpless. And it's not easy to bring a baby elephant up, because, I mean, you know, partly it requires so much attention, and you've just got to be so careful with what you feed it, and it's so susceptible without its mother's milk to infection. So they were, you know, it was such a precious little thing. And obviously I fell in love with him. He's only that big, huge ears.
Dumbo.
Exactly, he was Dumbo. And I had my ukulele, and I just sort of, you know, I write songs for kids. I have done for many, many years, and I just thought it'd be nice to sing a song to him. So I wrote this song. It was one evening, we had a fire, we were all sitting around the fire, and they brought the elephant for me to play the song to him. I was actually also with Paul Simonon, and he was playing the harmonica on the original. And started playing this song, Mr. Tembo, to him, and he just looked at me, and at one point his trunk came out, and he started sort of smelling my face and tickled my ear, and then he shat himself. But it wasn't like your normal African elephant shit. It was white
But
baby poo. It was quite a shock to all of us. Funny, very funny.
It's very
quite
funny.
A shock. So, but the reason why the gospel choir are on that song is because he's been looked after by these 4 guys who live in Mukamazi, and they have a little house, and they're very religious, and they watch a lot of gospel television. So in the evenings, he goes into his little room, and they sit with him, and there's a television. And he has a grey blanket next to him, not anymore because he's a bit older, but at the time he had a grey blanket next to him so he could feel like he was next to his mother. And he used to watch gospel TV every night. So I thought it would be nice to have that sound there, because once it was recorded, which he will get to hear it again, he might appreciate.
He grew up with gospel music.
Well, exactly, and in Swahili the word gospel is injili, so that's why I sing injili.
Injili.
Exactly.
Okay. Cool.
There you go.
Nice story.
Yeah. It's good to have a story.
Yeah.
Or two.
We can hear Timothy Leary on one song.
Yeah.
He's famous for being fascinated by transcendental experiences.
Yes.
And you also made an opera about the Elizabethan mathematician and astrologist Dr. D.
Yes.
Who was communicating with angels.
Yes.
So I was wondering, are you driven by spiritual matters?
I'm definitely sensitive to them. Whether I'm driven by them, I try to be informed by them at all times, but I'm not necessarily successful always. But I'm very interested in that esoteric world, yeah, I mean, doing Dr. D was, for me, was a very pivotal moment, because I kind of, it explained a lot of stuff which I might have just sort of instinctively understood, but I had no sort of way of articulating it and contextualizing it. So, yeah, I mean, I'm very interested. Yeah, I am interested in spiritual matters.
You've always had great success with all your projects, so does that put an extra pressure on you when you're approaching something completely new?
No, I just go about it the same way as I do everything else. I try and articulate the record. I mean, you know, you don't finish till you're happy with the record, and then when you start doing things like this and concerts, it's you know, it's just a process, and you're trying to get everyone to tune into each other, and then, you know, I mean, there's no guarantees, are there? So you just try and do your best. So I am trying to do my best again.
It's really hard to predict what we might expect from you next, as all of your past projects have been so diverse. So can you give us a clue?
I've got a lot of other things going on, but at the moment, this is what I'm concentrating on this for a little while anyway.
Okay. Thank you, Damon.
My pleasure. Nice to speak to you.
Nice to speak to you.